Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning for the Build America, Buy America webinar. We appreciate your spending time with us. We hope this will be informative. We've got a great panel that's going to be able to share their understanding and expertise on this program and the changes that have recently happened and how you can stay compliant. Just a couple of facilitation issues. The chat box is going to primarily be used by Sherry, who's helping out dropping links and notes and comments for you to use. It may not be something that you can use to chat back to us. I'm not sure why. We do have the Q&A. Please drop any of your questions or comments in the Q&A, and we'll be actively keeping an eye on those. And each presenter will have some time at the end of their presentation where we will address Q&A live. And what can't be addressed live will either be addressed after the program or during the next speaker in writing. My name's Scott Jakovich. I'm with the California Local Technical Assistance Program. I'd like to give you a quick introduction on what California LTAP is. We're part of a nationwide network of 51 centers, each designed to support one state in terms of local technical assistance and training and expertise for local and rural and tribal agencies managing their local roadways. Our mission is to improve the safety and performance of California's transportation systems through training and knowledge transfer. We are part of a network that we're part of a network of providers that offer training through California because the state is so big. We work with UC Berkeley, the Tech Transfer Center, who provides engineering training, and the College of Continuing Education at Sacramento State for compliance training. I'm sure a lot of you may already be very familiar with these. All of us operate under the guidance and mission of the Caltrans local Division of Local Assistance to serve California's 12 districts. Our priority is to be a one-stop shop for your training and technical assistance needs. I encourage you, when you get a chance, to visit our website at caltap.org, where we've produced and maintain a catalog of trainings that are relevant to local agencies. We've got a calendar of trainings that are coming up. It's an easy one website to use as your portal to access training and register for training. We keep that up to date with updates on policy and regulations and training events and webinars like this. You can engage with us through a number of media channels. I think Sherry's got our YouTube channel, which has got a nice intro for what the CalTap Center does. We've got LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube are channels that we address through social media. But otherwise, again, caltap.org. Come and visit, see what we can do for you. Drop us a line at admin@caltap.org if there's something that you need or something you would like to let us know about, or if you have any questions. For today's webinar, I'd like to introduce you to our first two presenters. This is Marie Gavian and Germain Bayan. This is Marie, Germain, why don't you guys take it over?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Liz Marie Gavian. I'm the Construction Program Manager for the Federal Highways California Division Office. And on behalf of the office, I would like to welcome you to this informational webinar and thank you for your participation. Our goal in this informational webinar is to share as much information as we have available to help you deliver a successful federal aid project and a project that is also eligible for federal reimbursement, meaning that, excuse me, we're meeting all the requirements, especially the new requirements on Buy America. So as you may know, Buy America is an evolving topic and there's still guidance that needs to be issued. But in the meantime, we are sharing all the information that we have available at the moment. So we hope that this is beneficial for you. So thank you for your participation.
Thank you, Ms. Mary. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this informational webinar. My name is Girmay Bayena. I'm with California Caltrans Division of Local Assistance. I'm the Construction Oversight Program Manager. So today, this is basically as a continuation to our information sharing. We have in the past shared information through office bulletins and DLA blogs, but this creates opportunity for us to be together and opens for question and answer. And so today I'm glad to be joined by Liz Mary from Federal Highways and Ken from Caltrans Division of Construction and Majid from Caltrans Division of Engineering Services, METS. So, and hopefully we'll have a good session today. Thanks.
Liz Marie, do you want to start us off?
Let's do that. Right, I am sharing my presentation. Let me know when you see it.
We don't see it yet.
Let me try again.
There we go.
What about now?
Yes.
Perfect, perfect. So, all right, so welcome again, and thank you for participating. Again, I'm gonna be discussing Buy America and Build America, Buy America updates. I have here a few of the topics that I'm gonna go through, including, we're gonna go from the start, what our current Buy America policy is, and within that policy, we're gonna be discussing a little bit of information of the use of non-domestic materials and products, when and how can we use those. Briefly discuss Federal Highways responsibilities related to Buy America. And then we're gonna go into the main discussion, which is Build America, Buy America Act, better known as BABA requirements. Discussing the recently issued OMB memo, initial implementation guidance. We're going to discuss the issued and proposed Buy America waivers. These are related to BABA and not older waivers. We're going to also talk about the review of the existing general applicability Buy America waivers, and touch briefly about 10 questions, frequently asked questions that we typically get on projects related to BABA and its implementation. And then discuss Buy America efforts, just a brief summary, and finish with links and information as part of the available guidance that Federal Highways has issued so far. But before I go into the presentation, I would like to mention that this presentation focuses on BABA implementation and is tailored to local agencies in California. In the event there's a discrepancy, official guidance and publications will supersede the content of this PowerPoint presentation. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is subject to change based on future guidance. And we're certainly anticipating future guidance. So I encourage you to consult with Caltrans Division of Local Assistance for any additional details or clarifications that you may need on your specific project. So with that said, let's get into our Buy America policy. So our Federal Highways Buy America requirements have been in place for over 40 years, where it required that all steel and iron material incorporated into the project. Let me finish. Wait a second, I need to move something out of my window here. Now it's working. So which it required that all steel and iron permanently incorporated into the project is produced in United States, meaning that all manufacturing processes for such materials from the initial melting stage through the application of coatings occurred in United States. Well, last year that policy changed due to BABA, the Build America, Buy America Act, under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, better known as IIJA. So what BABA did, BABA extended the Buy America requirements to certain listed construction materials, requiring that they are all manufactured in the United States, meaning that all their manufacturing processes, again, occurred in the United States. And you might have heard Caltrans referring to the new Buy America requirements as Buy America 2.0, which basically is the same as BABA. So I just want to make sure that we know that if you heard the term Buy America 2.0, we are referring to BABA, and that's what is being discussed here today. Our Buy America policy applies to two types of projects. The first type of project is any project that is federally funded, or any phase of that project that is federally funded, and a non-federally aid funded project if the non-federal aid contract is included within the scope of the NEPA document, and at least one of the other contracts within the scope of the same NEPA document, and that's your environmental document, is funded or will be funded with federal aid funds. This will include any contracts eligible for federal aid assistance, including your environmental, design, right-of-way construction, or any other contract under that environmental document. Now, these Buy America requirements on non-federally funded project was implemented under MAP 21 back in 2012. So this is something that has been out there for a little while now, but it's always good to just remember that this type of project is also, if these characteristics are met, this type of project is also subject to Buy America requirements. So in summary, our current Buy America policy applies to steel, iron, manufactured products with content of steel and iron higher than 90% by weight. And you can find additional information about manufactured products in our general applicability waiver on manufactured products, which was issued in 1983. And also you can see Caltrans Deputy Directive 119 for additional information on manufactured products. And because of BABA, Buy America also now applies to construction materials that are permanently incorporated into the project. Now, Buy America requirements applies regardless of how the products and materials are procured, meaning that Buy America requirements will continue to apply if the materials are donated, they're added by a change order, someone else funds them, or even if the agency furnished them through a separate contract. Now, Buy America does not apply to temporary elements. If it's temporary, if it's not going to remain in the project at the end of the project, Buy America does not apply. It doesn't apply to manufactured products with less than 90% steel or iron content by weight. And it doesn't apply to items that are simply relocated or moved from a place within the project to another place within the same project. Now, if the agency needs to incorporate non-domestic products or materials, there are three options to do so without jeopardizing the federal reimbursement eligibility of the project. The first one is the minimal use, which is currently only applicable to steel and iron. The second one is alternate bid provisions, which is also only applicable to steel and iron. And the last one is the Buy America waiver process, which is applicable to all of them, including construction materials. And I'm going to be discussing this in more detail in the next slides. Now, for the minimal usage, this one allows for the use of non-domestic products totaling the greater of 2,500 or 0.1% of the total contract amount. Now, once this minimal usage is reached, any future non-domestic use will require a Buy America waiver, and this is if rescoping nor redesign can be achieved. Now, the agency, the LPAs are responsible to document the minimal use numbers and quantities and ensure that the maximum is not exceeded at any point during the contract. Under option number 2, alternate bids provision, agencies have the option to include alternate bids for domestic and non-domestic steel and iron materials. This means that the agency will develop 2 sets of plans, specifications, and estimate package for the domestic and non-domestic project. Now, this one occurred during the design and advertisement phases. So that's something that we have to keep in mind, because sometimes people think, well, we can use the 25% and the project is already under construction. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case, because for this option, the contract provisions when you're bidding the project must include and require that all bidders submit a bid based on furnishing domestic steel and iron materials. And they also have to clearly state that the contract will be awarded to the bidder who submits the lowest total bid based on providing domestic steel and iron materials. And that's unless such domestic total bid is less than 25% higher than the total bid based on the non-domestic steel or iron products. Now, when the bidders go submit their bids, they have to submit a bid based on domestic products, and the option is to submit the one that is on the non-domestic bid. So again, as I mentioned, as the process determines, this provision can only be used during the project design, advertisement, and bid phase. Now, the last option to incorporate non-domestic products is obtaining a Buy America waiver. This one currently applies to steel, iron, and construction materials, as I mentioned in a few slides back. This process is based on public interest, and if there is no sufficient supply of domestic materials of satisfactory quality. This is a very lengthy process, and that's something to keep in mind. It's a very lengthy process, which requires years to process. And there is no certainty that at the end of the waiver review process, it will be approved. And we seldomly, very rare, approve Buy America waivers. So that's something that is very important to keep in mind. Now, these waivers, any Buy America waivers, must be approved prior to the advertisement of bids. And if a Buy America waiver need is discovered during construction, then the waiver must be approved prior to incorporate the material into the project. As far as our Buy America waiver responsibilities, and as reflected in our stewardship and oversight agreement with Caltrans, Federal Highways, we continue to be responsible for the approval of Buy America waivers. As you can see here on this slide, this is a small clip of some of the tables that we have in that stewardship and oversight agreement. And as you can see here in red and on the note for waiver Buy America provisions, this approval cannot be delegated to Caltrans nor the local agencies. So we're going to continue to retain that approval of the Buy America waivers. Now, at the division level, we are responsible for the review of the waiver request for completeness. Once the package is ready, we would recommend that to our headquarters Office of Infrastructure for further review, and they will continue the coordination internally. We also work with Caltrans Division of Local Assistance to coordinate any additional information that may be required for the agency to complete the package, or any follow-ups from any of the our offices in headquarters or the Made in America office. Now, as you may have heard, there have been changes in our Buy America policy, and they were triggered by the Build America, Buy America Act, and that's what we're going to be discussing now. So how did we get here? How was this incorporated into our policy? Well, in January 2021, President Biden signed Executive Order 14005 on ensuring the future is made in all of America by all of America's workers, where it required federal agencies to maximize the use of domestic goods, materials, and products. Later in November 2021, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, was signed into law, requiring that by May 14th, 2022, that a year ago, a little bit over a year ago, federal agencies, including us, Federal Highways, ensure application of the new Buy America requirements on infrastructure projects. In response to the IIJA requirements in April 2022, the Office of Management and Budgets, OMB, issued a memorandum on the initial implementation guidance of the new Buy America requirements on federally assisted programs for infrastructure, including those under the Federal Highway Program, basically including those programs for federal highways. So this memo was addressed to all the federal agencies, and we have to know that this is a non-binding memo, so the guidance they provided is preliminary and subject to change. Still, since IIJA required that May 14, 2022, all federal assisted projects met Buy America requirements on all iron and steel, which we Federal Highways, we've been applying this for over 4 decades now, so no changes were needed in this area. Number 2, all manufactured products. And as you see on the slide, I intentionally strike out this one, because this one, we don't have to comply with this requirement here, because we have a general applicability waiver on manufactured products that is still valid. It's the 1983 waiver. So if you get to read this memo and you see this part here that discusses the 55% of the total cost of the components, how to define what a manufactured product is, please just scratch that, ignore it. We don't have to comply with that. We follow our general applicability waiver for manufactured products. And number 3, and all construction materials. So this one was new to Federal Highways, where Buy America requirements were extended to some listed construction materials. So as you can see, the only changes applicable to Federal Highways were those related to construction materials. We were doing already iron, steel, or manufactured product. We have a waiver, so the new one was construction materials. So all our current policies on steel and iron remain valid. Nothing changed on that regard. Our manufactured product requirements will not change based on this memo, meaning that our 1983 manufactured product waiver is still valid. And I'm going to be discussing its review later on in the presentation. And again, the only impact will be adding construction materials to those materials subject to Buy America. Now, the OMB memo is applicable to Federal Highways since IIJA defined infrastructure as roads, highway, bridges, public transportation, utilities, broadband infrastructure. And IIJA also stated that structures, facilities, and equipment that generate, transport, and distribute energy, including those electric vehicle charging, should be treated as infrastructure. So that's the reason why this is applicable to our federal aid projects. Now, that same memo listed the construction materials subject to Buy America requirements as an article, material, or supply that is or consists primarily of non-ferrous metals, plastic and polymer-based products, glass, lumber, or drywall. I have to note that these are the only items listed here as construction materials. Items such as iron or steel, manufactured products, cement, cementitious materials, aggregates such as stone, sand, gravel, aggregate binding agents or additive are not considered construction materials. So we're just talking about this listing of 5 items here. Now, to facilitate the categorization of articles, materials, or supplies, OMB determined that such materials should only fall in one category. That would be steel or iron, manufactured products, or a construction material. So to clarify, the memo states that items that consist of 2 or more of those listed materials combined through a manufacturing process are considered a manufactured product. And items that include one of the listed construction materials combined with another material not listed is also considered a manufactured product. Now, we're still waiting on final standards and definition for all manufacturing processes for those listed construction materials. So in the meantime, the OMB memo suggested agency to consider all manufacturing processes for construction materials to include at least the final manufacturing process and the immediate proceeding manufacturing stage for the construction material. Now, here we have a listing of the issued and proposed Buy America waivers as it relates to BABA. This is a very short summary, but I'm going to be discussing each of them in more detail as I move into the presentation. The first one was a temporary Buy America waiver for construction materials. This was effective on May 14th, 2022, and it expired on November 2, 2022. The second one is a waiver on Buy America requirements on construction materials for certain contracts and solicitations. This one was issued on January 30th, 2023, so it's a recent waiver. The third one is a waiver of Buy America requirement for electric vehicle chargers, issued on February 21, 2023. And the last one is a notice of proposed waiver of Buy America requirements for de minimis cost, small grants, and minor components. This one has not been issued, is still under review. So the first waiver that I mentioned was issued in May 2022. This was a temporary Buy America waiver on construction materials. It was made effective on May 14th, 2022, as I mentioned. This waiver had a duration of 180 days, and it expired on November 10th, 2022, since it was not extended. And this is a very important date, because this means that Buy America requirements on construction materials are applicable to any projects authorized by federal highways. And by that, I mean any project with an approved E76 on or after November 10th, 2022, meaning that if your project or phase of your projects was authorized or received an E76 approval on November 10th, 2022, or after November 10th, 2022, is subject to Buy America requirements on construction materials. Waiver number 2 was issued to waive Buy America requirements for construction materials just for certain contracts and solicitations. This one was issued on January 30, 2023. And although this waiver was tailored to the Federal Transit Administration, FTA, federal highways could use this waiver as long as the timeframes that they establish in the waiver are met. So as written, the waiver waives BABA requirement for those construction materials authorized before, for those contracts authorized before November 10th, 2022, which basically falls within the previously discussed waiver. So this is not new, but what is important about this waiver is that it also waives BABA or Buy America requirements on construction materials to contracts enter into before March 10th, 2023, that resulted from solicitation published before May 14, 2022. And they may be a few contracts with long advertisement and solicitation periods. The third Buy America waiver is the electrical vehicle chargers. This waiver was issued on February 21, 2023, and effective on March 23, 2023. This is a two-phase waiver. It's also a short-term public interest waiver, which waives Buy America requirements for steel, iron, manufactured products, and construction materials in electric vehicle chargers, EV chargers. Under this waiver, they also remove EV chargers from under the existing general applicability waiver for manufactured products, meaning that now all Buy America waivers related to EV chargers will be addressed separately from the waiver. As I mentioned, this is a two-phase waiver where phase 1 applies to all EV chargers manufactured by July 1st, 2024, whose finally assembly occurs in the United States and whose installation has begun by October 1, 2024. Phase 2 applies to all EV chargers manufactured on or after July 1st, 2024, if, and that if has to be met, if the final assembly occurs in the United States and the cost of components manufactured in the United States exceeds 55% of the cost of all components. Now, this waiver also notes that EV chargers housing components, the EV charger housing component, also known as its cabinets or enclosures, is not covered under this waiver and must comply with Buy America requirements. The last one is the notice of proposed waiver for de minimis cost, small grants, and minor components. The comment period closed on November 20th, 2022, and currently the proposed waiver is being reviewed by the Office of the Secretary of Transportation, OST. Under this waiver, and as proposed, the waiver includes de minimis cost, small grants, and minor components. As proposed, the de minimis will allow the use of non-domestic steel, iron, and construction materials to a maximum of the lesser of $1 million or 5% of the allowable cost under the Federal Financial Assistance Award. Under the small grants, it would waive the Buy America requirements on federally financial assistance award below $500,000, and the minor components will waive the Buy America requirement if the non-domestic miscellaneous minor component is less than 5% of the total cost, material cost of an otherwise domestic iron or steel product. But as I mentioned, this waiver is still under review and has not been issued, meaning that the information that you see here is not final and is subject to change. We'll have to wait until the final waiver is issued to see exactly what flexibilities we're going to have under this waiver. Now, as part of the OMB memo, federal agencies, including federal highways, were instructed to review any general applicability waiver issued more than 5 years before November 15th, 2021. And as you can see here on this slide, we currently have 4 general applicability waivers, which all of them were issued way before 5 years before November 15, 2021. We have the manufactured products general applicability waiver, which was issued in 1983, which is currently under review. And I'm going to discuss a little bit more in detail on the next slide. We have the raw materials waiver, ferry boats, concrete pole for one. So again, as you can see, all of these are older than 5 years or 6 years now. So all of them need to be reviewed. Our headquarters is prioritizing the most popular waivers for federal highways, which are the manufactured products and the raw materials waivers. The other 2 waivers, the ferry boats and the concrete pole for one, those will not affect our federal aid program. So we don't have to worry about those for now. So now, we continue implementing all the general applicability waivers. Our manufactured products waiver from 1983 is still valid. Our raw materials waiver is still valid. We'll have to wait until the review period is finalized and then made effective. Any changes made effective, that's when we are gonna look into what the changes are. Now, as I mentioned, we currently have 1 existing general applicability waiver under review, which is the manufactured product waiver from 1983. The comment period closed on May 22 in 2023, just recently, after its original 30-day comment period was extended to 60 days. And the reason why it was extended was to address concerns expressed from stakeholders on the inadequate time for a meaningful review. They wanted to have additional time to gather the information and provide comprehensive comments. So the comment period closed And now the review will continue, the comments will be considered, and at some point, Federal Highways will determine whether to continue, discontinue, or modify that existing waiver. So at that time, when we get the final, is when we can say, well, this is where we're going. For now, anything that is out there is just preliminary. But for the most part, this notice was to require information and gather information from the stakeholders. And here at the bottom of the slide, you have a link to the notices for comments and the comments also provided from the stakeholders. In addition to the waivers effort, there is a proposed rulemaking for guidance for grants and agreements. OMB, the Office of Management and Budgets, is proposing a new Part 184 in 2 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, Chapter 1, to support implementation of the Act and clarify the 16 requirements within 2 CFR 200. Now, these proposed revisions are intended to improve uniformity and consistency in the implementation of BABA requirements across the government. The comment period closed on March 13. I have November in my mind stuck. So the comment period closed on March 13, 2023, and is currently under review by OMB. As far as our efforts moving forward, USDOT will issue final determination on the proposed de minimis waiver that I just mentioned. And please note again that any proposed waivers is not final until issued and made effective. Now, we also continue with the review of the general applicability waivers on manufactured products. That one is ongoing, and we expect that the next one to be put into the review process will be the raw materials waiver. We still waiting on OMB's issuance of the final guidance for construction materials, but in the meantime, we do have some preliminary guidance that we can use to implement BABA. And we also here at the division level, we continue to provide technical assistance to Caltrans and the local agencies, of course, as it relates to Buy America. Now, this is just a quick reminder as far as our existing policy on steel and iron and manufactured products. This policy continued to apply to our projects. This includes Caltrans Deputy Directive 119. The only change that BABA made to Buy America is just that extended the Buy America requirements to those listed construction materials, the non-ferrous metal, the plastic and polymer-based products, glass, lumber, and drywall. And that's applicable to those projects authorized or on or after November 10th, 2022. Here are just a few frequently asked questions and a little bit of discussion on their responses. So the first one is more a review of what we just discussed earlier in the presentation. Number one, which projects are subject to Buy America requirements? All phases of a federally funded project, and also non-federally funded project or phase if the non-federally contract is included within the scope of the NEPA document, if it's included within that scope of your environmental document, and at least one other contract within the scope of that same NEPA document is funded or will be funded with federal funds. This includes any contracts eligible for federal aid assistance, including but not limited to environmental, design, right-of-way, construction, etc. Number two, do federal highways existing Buy America requirements for steel, iron items, and manufactured products continue to apply? Yes. BABA just extended the application of Buy America requirements to a new category of products, construction materials, those that we listed earlier in the presentation. Number three, my project has an approved E76 to excuse me, My project has an approved E76 prior to November 10th, 2022. Would BABA, Buy America Requirements of Construction Materials, apply? The answer is no. BABA only applies to project or phases authorized on or after November 10th, 2022. Number 4, would BABA requirements apply if the original E76 is amended? No. An E76 modification to an original E76 approved on or before November 9th, 2022 would not trigger BABA requirements. Number 5, my project has an original E76 approved on or after November 10th, 2022. Are BABA requirements applicable? Yes. The agency must ensure all projects subject to BABA requirements contain the appropriate updates to the Buy America provisions. And this includes updating the Buy America specification on all projects or phases authorized on or after November 10th, 2022. And later in the presentation, Caltrans is going to be discussing the changes to the standard special provisions, as well as changes to Exhibit 12G and the official bulletins that were issued to clarify the specifications that need to be included on this project. Number 6, can I issue a contract change order to remove the Buy America requirements, including BABA? No. If you do so, you're jeopardizing your federal eligibility for reimbursement on your project, not only your construction project, but any other project or phases under the NEPA umbrella of that construction project. So that's why it's very important to make sure that we comply with Buy America, because it can not only jeopardize that particular project, it can jeopardize the federal reimbursement opportunity for any phases under your project, including environmental, right-of-way, design, any other phases. Number 7, if I issue a contract change order on or after November 10th, 2022, will I have to comply with BABA? Well, it depends. If the project authorization was issued before November 10th, 2022, and by project authorization, I'm saying your E76 was approved by Federal Highways before November 10th, 2022, BABA requirements do not apply to the change order work. If the project was authorized on or after November 10th, 2022, BABA requirements apply to any change order issued on the project. Number 8, can I approve the use of non-domestic products that are subject to Buy America by issuing a contract change order? No. There are only 3 methods to incorporate non-domestic products into a contract subject to Buy America requirements. And as we discussed, those were the minimal use for non-domestic products, alternate bid provisions, and the Buy America waiver process. Number 9, can I incorporate non-domestic steel, iron, steel or iron and construction material products if they are donated by other agency or funded with non-federal funding? The answer is no. Buy America requirements apply to all steel and iron manufactured products and construction materials that are permanently incorporated into the project, regardless of its procurement process and funding source. So it doesn't matter who and how that material or articles were obtained. Anything that is permanently incorporated into a federal aid project must comply with Buy America, unless you were able to obtain any of the 3 methods discussed under question number 8. And lastly, question number 10, can I use the steel and iron de minimis provision, that 0.1% of the contract value or the 2,500 the greater for construction materials? The answer is no. Unfortunately, the minimal use provision currently only applies to steel and iron, since at this time the minimus has not been approved for construction materials subject to Buy America requirements. Now, this is my last slide. This one discuss a little bit of the guidance available to you The first one we have here is the BABA question and answer. This one addressed the implementation of Buy America requirements on construction materials. It was recently issued back in February. You have a link there to get access to that one and all of the other ones as well. Number 2 is Federal Highways Buy America Q&A for federal aid program. This one addressed steel, iron, and manufactured products. It was issued a while ago, back in 2012. So our Office of Program Administration posted these questions and answered to excuse me, so that Federal Highway Division offices, state DOTs, and the public were aware of our responses and how we implement Buy America. Number 3, here we have Buy America issues to consider for utility work on projects. This was issued again back in 2012. This one addressed the applicability of Buy America requirements for utility work completed as part of a larger federal aid highway project. And lastly, the federal aid essential for local public agencies, where you can find videos and information related to Buy America contract requirements. A lot of great information in all of these links. I encourage you to go through them. If you're not familiar with them, get familiar with them. And if you are familiar with them, just refresh your knowledge on Buy America. You know why this is important. We want to make sure that your projects remain eligible for federal reimbursement. So with this, I thank you for your time, and I open it up for questions.
Thanks, Ms. Marie. That was rich with information. We do have a handful of questions. The first from one Navarro, who I think shares a sentiment of anyone working with federally legislated programs, and therefore I don't know if there's much of an answer. Why is the process of engaging with Buy America so lengthy?
I'm trying to find your screen. Yeah.
These are just in the Q&A.
All right, so I cannot see you, but that's fine. Why is it so lengthy? Well, unfortunately, I cannot address that question on its entirety, but I can tell you that the process is a very lengthy process because we have multiple agencies involved in the review and approval of these waivers, and part of the effort that is the goal right now. Part of the effort is to reduce the timing for the review process. And when I say the review process, and I specifically say the review process because when we start the process for reviewing a waiver, that doesn't guarantee that the waiver is going to be approved. There are just very few waivers that get approved. So what they're trying to do is to streamline that process. So we don't have waivers that are out there for, well, waiver requests that are out there for years and years, and we don't hear back for whatever reason. So hopefully with the new implementation guidance that we're going to receive from the Made in America office, that process is streamlined and we get responses in a faster way.
Great. Scott Bauer asks, is the strike through of the manufactured products provision that you had on your slide expected to change at some point in the future? And so will it become applicable?
Well, we don't know. We don't know. Right now, that one is certainly not applicable to federal highways. And the reason why I say I don't know is because we are reviewing that the general applicability waiver for manufactured products. We're currently reviewing that one right now. So we don't know if it's going to continue as it is, if it's going to be modified, or how it's going to be modified, or if it's going to be just eliminated. So that's something that we don't know at this point. So to answer your question directly, number 2, it is not applicable to federal highways. our 1983 waiver, general applicability waiver is the one that remains in place until we finalize the review process and we see whether it was changed, it remained the same, or it was eliminated.
We have a question from Mike Santos. He's asking, are false work materials such as temporary forms exempt from BABA?
Anything that is not permanently incorporated into your project, false work, if the false work is to be removed at the end of the project, is not to remain, it is not subject to Buy America.
Okay, and here's a bit of a longer question from James DeMont. Does the 1983 manufactured products Buy America waiver likewise apply to other US DOT agencies, including the Maritime Administration? And then he goes on to say, MERED's Port Infrastructure Development Program is providing some $100 million per year to California ports, many of which are committing to procuring zero-emission equipment and supporting infrastructure that may not have domestic sources available, particularly for battery components.
The manufactured products waiver is a Federal Highways issued waiver, and it wouldn't apply to any other agencies. It's only for Federal Highways.
Okay, we have got a couple more questions on the manufactured products waiver, and that is, does that include parking meters and payment kiosks? And I believe also Diana's asking fiber optic cabling and microducts. You know, so maybe there's some questions on the manufactured products waiver.
Yeah, I think this question, Caltrans is in a better position to address that question.
Is that something we want to answer offline, or?
Unless Ken has any input on that item.
I would just say go back to that 90% threshold value. And if that manufactured product consists of more than 90%, I mean 90% or more of steel or iron, then yes, it is subject to Buy America, the steel and iron component.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Ken. We have a couple more questions we got time for. I have a utility agreement signed back in December of 2013 before Buy America requirements. The agreement is still in effect because it is for a multi-phase project that is not yet completed. Do I need to amend the agreement to meet BABA if I use federal money on the project?
Anything related to utilities will have to take offline.
Okay. Which federal requirements should be used for projects funded with American Rescue Plan Act funds?
The only test that I would do if this a project under Title 23, then Buy America applies. I'm not sure where that program comes from, but I will check if it's a program under Title 23. The answer will be yes, Buy America applies.
Okay, and again, to everybody, thank you for your questions. We're going to answer as many as we can live. What doesn't get answered, we will address after the presentation and send out answers. Danny Chen asks, do locally furnished materials such as manhole frames, which are not seeking reimbursement, but part of the federal aid contract, are they required to meet Buy America requirements?
Anything that is permanently incorporated into the project, regardless of how is procured, is subject to Buy America requirements.
Okay, and are the material requirements applicable to traffic signal control cards and signal heads?
Again, Ken, please.
Yeah, I would just say you need to go back to that manufactured product definition and the 90% threshold. So if these particular items consist of more than one construction material, they fall under the manufactured product definition, and therefore The only manufactured products we're concerned about are those that contain steel or iron subject to that 90% threshold.
Thanks, Ken. Let's try this question from Jonathan in the time we have left. Is utility relocation work subject to BABA if the work is not paid for by the agency and is not part of the construction contract?
I will take that one offline, but if that work, if the state cannot reimburse the agency for the work, or if the state cannot reimburse the utility for the work because it's prohibited by law, then it's not subject to Buy America. Then the work is not subject to Buy America. But to address, I will address the detail of that question offline as well.
Great, thank you, Liz Marie, and thank you for your presentation. We're going to move on to our next session, which is with Ken Darby, who you just heard from, Caltrans Division of Construction, and Majid Armanous, Caltrans Senior Bridge Engineer. They're going to be talking about the BABA implementation and Caltrans contract requirements. Ken?
Thanks, Scott. I'm just trying to get the presentation here. Okay. Yeah, so as far as an outline of today's presentation, it's really going to go through a lot of the same information that Liz Marie presented. We'll talk about the background of the new Buy America requirements through BABA. We'll also look at the preceding requirements for steel and iron primarily. And then we'll talk about our implementation efforts that we've undertaken today to implement these new requirements for Buy America. And we'll touch upon some potential future changes that I think Liz Marie also presented that have a high likelihood of affecting future Buy America requirements. And then at the end, we should have time to answer some questions. And along that line, Majid will be monitoring the question and answer, and he'll be trying to answer those questions as they come in. But at the end, we will have an opportunity to review those and maybe take some additional questions and answers. So as Liz Marie really went into a lot of detail, we've had the original Buy America requirements for steel and iron for about 40 years. Really, they came into play with the passage of the Surface Transportation Assistance Act of 1982. And they have well-established regulations and guidance in place. And really, they were largely unchanged up until the passage of MAP 21 back in 2012, where they were expanded to those other aspects of projects under the NEPA document, including utility relocations. Fast forward to November 2021 and the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the signing into law, I should say, and that included the Build America, Buy America Act. And that's really resulted in what we have now in three areas of Buy America coverage. We have the steel and iron, which are largely unchanged, the manufactured products, and then we also have these additional construction materials, which consist of the non-ferrous metals, the plastic and polymer-based products, lumber, glass, and drywall. The next item is the OMB guidance that was provided in April of 2022. And I think it's important to mention that this was really provided to federal agencies and departments charged with implementing these new Buy America requirements on infrastructure projects. And keeping that in mind, the multitude of federal agencies and departments involved, what we talk about here today are really under FHWA's control. So those federal monies under FHWA's purview. If you're doing work with another federal agency or department, EPA, HUD, they more than likely will have slightly different Buy America requirements. So just keep that in mind. And as we've already discussed, and it's actually the next item here, the 1983 manufactured product waiver is very important to applying Buy America for federal highway projects. When you do work with these other federal agencies and departments, they do not necessarily have that in place. Okay, the OMB guidance, it also identifies the new construction materials. It lists them specifically. It also provides additional Buy America waiver information. Again, we have those 3 areas of Buy America waivers. We have non-availability of a product, public interest, and then we have the project cost aspect where your domestic bid option has to come in 25% greater than your non-domestic bid option. Along the Buy America waiver item, right now we've been told we're in a moratorium period. Even when we were not in the moratorium period, it's not uncommon for those requests to take, as Liz Marie said, 24 months. And then there's no guarantee that they would be approved. So currently we are in a moratorium period where FHWA headquarters is not considering final determination on those requests. And my understanding is they're waiting for additional guidance from the Made in America office within the Office of Management and Budgets. Along those lines, the OMB guidance did create a new Made in America office, and their primary purpose is to maximize and enforce existing Made in America laws. So there will be a lot of scrutiny on the new Buy America requirements. As Liz Marie said, originally this would have required the new Buy America provisions in contracts as of May 14th, 2022, but there was this 180-day temporary waiver provided just on the construction material aspects, and that was issued back on May 19th, 2022. That resulted in a new implementation date, again, just on the additional construction materials aspect, as of November 10th, 2022. One other thing I want to mention is on July 28th, 2022, the US DOT did publish a request for information on the Federal Register concerning Buy America for these additional construction materials. That garnered a lot of comments from construction industry, as well as recipients of federal aid funds as far as implementing these new requirements. And while there was not anything specifically adopted related to those comments, I think we have seen some additional proposed waivers come about due to some of those comments. So just wanted to mention that. As far as our implementation efforts to date, early on, Caltrans created what we call the Buy America implementation team, and that's comprised of affected groups within Caltrans, design, construction, local assistance, right-of-way, as well as our partners in FHWA California division. And its purpose was, how are we going to implement these new requirements on our contracts? We've talked about this implementation date, and Liz Marie provided the detailed requirements, what it means to Caltrans for projects that are being submitted to our office engineer. That's our traditional design bid build type of project. Those need to contain the new Buy America provisions as of November 10th, 2022. This date also affects our utility agreements, our minor B contracts, our emergency force account, emergency limited bid contracts, as well as our department furnished material contracts, or what used to be known as state furnished material contracts. In applying this, it's definitely mandated for our federal aid risk projects. And when we say federal aid risk projects, we're talking about not only those that include federal aid directly, but as Liz Marie said, if they're under the NEPA umbrella, regardless of their funding, if another project has federal aid included in there, you're putting those federal aid monies at risk if you're not complying with Buy America requirements on the subject project. And there could also be the case where you're doing the construction project without any federal aid, but it has a different phase of work with federal aid. Again, that construction project needs to comply with Buy America to not jeopardize those federal aid monies. And then there's a fourth case, basically where we want to keep that project open for future federal aid eligibility. And often, there'll be a readjustment of allotments to states because states haven't used their federal aid allotments. So we want to have these projects available to possibly get federal monies at a later time. So it's definitely mandated for federal aid risk projects. We really also try to mandate it for our non-federal aid risk projects just because we want a simple single business practice as much as possible. And that was our standard with the preceding Buy America requirements. But in this case, we are allowing an exception on non-federal aid risk projects if the project engineer has identified a specific domestic supply concern issue with a project material or product that would otherwise be subject to Buy America. So in those very limited cases, we will allow them to exempt that non-federal aid risk project from Buy America. Some of the other work that's taken place, we've had our specification owners review their standard work items to assure that there are domestic manufacturers, producers available for those items subject to Buy America. And while they've been able to do that, there's still a concern about what will happen to the domestic supply versus the new domestic demand by implementing these requirements across the nation. We've also reviewed our authorized material list and tried to differentiate non-domestic sources from domestic sources for those lists that are subject to Buy America. And then we've looked at our statewide department furnished material contracts to make sure we're compliant with Buy America there. But really the biggest accomplishment to date has been the approval of standard special provision SSP 6104 Buy America, and that was posted originally back in September 23rd, 2022, and we'll be looking at that here shortly. But before I go to that, I did want to look at the OMB guidance a little closer to see how that shaped our specification. Again, we have three primary areas of coverage: steel or iron, manufactured products, and the reason that has an asterisk, we've talked about that quite a bit, is because of the 1983 manufactured product waiver. Most manufactured products subject to FHWA funds really don't have, are not subject to Buy America. The exception to that are those manufactured products containing steel or iron. And we'll look at the spec a little closer in that regard. And then these additional construction materials, which are really the changes through BABA, non-ferrous metals, plastic or polymer-based products, lumber, glass, and drywall. Again, as Liz Marie mentioned, for the purpose of applying Buy America, any particular item can only fall within one of these three categories. And the other important thing that OMB guidance provides is a differentiation between a construction material and a manufactured product. And what it essentially says, if you combine two or more different construction materials in the manufacturing or production process, the resultant is a manufactured product. And the example they give in the OMB guidance is a glass pane. So if that glass pane is produced and then shipped out to the project site, it would fall under the construction material definition. Whereas if that glass pane, the manufacturer then puts a typical aluminum frame or vinyl frame around the pane and it's shipped out the project, it then becomes a manufactured product and needs to conform to those requirements. So in the case with our use on the federal highway side, one would be covered, one would not be covered. So it's very important you look at that differentiation of a construction material or manufactured product. Some other exclusions, like tools and construction equipment used in constructing the work are not subject to Buy America. And the reason equipment has an asterisk on there, if it's permanently installed into the work, it could be subject to Buy America, depending on, what category it falls within or without. Then these temporary elements that are not incorporated into the permanent work, we talked about formwork or false work. Again, as long as it's not incorporated into the permanent work. Another example might be a temporary culvert that's used on the project and then later removed. Existing items that are relocated from one location to another on the project. So a manhole, for instance, or maybe another culvert. So as long as you're just taking that material and relocating it, it's not subject to Buy America. Now, if you get out there and you find that it's reached the end of its service life and needs to be replaced, then it is going to be subject to Buy America coverage. Okay, this next one is really for the additional construction materials only. The raw materials, surface treatments, and coatings have not been well defined like we have well-defined requirements for steel and iron in this regard. So for now, at least, until we get more distinct information from OMB and other federal agencies and departments, we're not requiring that those raw materials, surface treatments, and coatings be subject to Buy America. So, for example, U.S. lumber, if they're using Canadian timber and then it's shipped down for processing in the U.S., that would be acceptable for us. Another example would be utilizing non-domestic petroleum products in creating the plastic and polymer resins necessary for creating those products. That would also be acceptable. The next one, manufactured products not containing steel or iron. Again, those currently fall under the 1983 manufactured product waiver that FHWA has in place. So at least currently, those are not subject to Buy America. And then other exclusions, both the IIJA and BABA mention specifically cement, aggregate, admixtures, cementitious materials, and aggregate binders, including asphalt, are being exempt at this time from Buy America. And so when we look at the spec, keep in mind that it's focused on what has to meet Buy America. It's not going to list those items that do not need to meet Buy America. So the new Buy America spec, and we're going to look at that shortly, what you're going to see is the edited version that's going to be used in probably 95% of our design bid build projects. Similar requirements are going to be in our design build, our CMGC contracts, our minor Bs, emergency force account, emergency limited bid contracts. The SSP that's been approved does have editable paragraphs where you could add in and identify materials that have received a Buy America waiver. Again, we're in a moratorium period, so that's unlikely at this point. And then just as a caution, again, we have those non-federal aid risk projects where if there is a domestic supply concern identified, we will allow the elimination of the federal Buy America requirements. So now I'm going to try to share the spec here, which is in a different. Okay, so this is going to look very familiar to what we've discussed already. The general section is really identifying those exclusions, the tools and construction equipment, the temporary work. The next section here is the crumb rubber, which is a state mandated Buy America requirement, and that's really specific to Caltrans. Then we have the steel and iron material requirement, which is essentially unchanged We still have the allowance for the non-domestic raw iron and steel materials. And then we also have the minimum use allowance, which is the greater of 0.1% or $2,500. And again, that is only for steel and iron materials. We don't have a similar minimum use allowance for the additional construction materials that we'll see before, or see later, sorry. The manufactured product section, again, we're only concerned with those manufactured products containing steel and iron. And this is directly in line with what we have in Deputy Directive 119. And so for precast concrete manufactured products, if there's any steel or iron in them, they are subject to Buy America, the steel and iron. And then otherwise, we have this 90% by weight of the manufactured product. So if your steel or iron comprises 90% or more by weight of the total manufactured product, then yes, that steel and iron aspect is subject to Buy America. Okay, then the spec goes into construction materials. It identifies the non-ferrous metals, the plastic and polymer-based products, glass, lumber, and drywall. It also discusses where, you know, if you combine these, one or more of these materials in the manufacturing process with another construction materials, that it's not subject to Buy America unless otherwise specified. The otherwise specified is, you know, if you combine it with the steel or iron, you're going to fall back into that case above potentially. The other important aspect I want to kind of stress here is what we're doing initially as far as validating Buy America for these additional construction materials is requiring the certificate of compliance from the manufacturer or producer. And those need to be provided with each delivery of these types of materials to the project. It's important to note that we only accept those from the manufacturer or producer. We don't accept those from a contractor or a supplier. So this is a really kind of a big change for our contractors out there. Okay, now I'm going to go to, let's see if I can just. I'm going back to the PowerPoint real quickly. Okay, this slide just introduces the construction procedure directive that was issued back in December of last year. It's got a link on there, but I understand you've already received the CPD, but nevertheless, that link will take you to this particular CPD as well as other CPDs that have been issued. And they're often a good source of information. This is what we expect our construction personnel to, it's guidance for them in implementing these new requirements. So we're going to share the CPD. Again, this came out in December 2022, and it's got a lot of the same information we've been discussing. I'm just going to highlight a couple additional items that you may want to be aware of. We encourage our people to discuss the new Buy America requirements at the pre-construction conference, have a Buy America topic there. We're also trying to make sure that our contractors are using this form CM 3101, the notice of materials to be used, that identifies where a material or product is being manufactured or produced from. It also allows the department to arrange for inspection services, but really it has a lot of good purposes and helps to avoid potential pitfalls. It also talks about certificate of compliance requirements in section 6-203C of our standard specs. It stresses again that that minimum use allowance is only applicable to steel and iron materials, not these additional construction materials. It talks about these authorized material lists where there may be, it may differentiate items by domestic or non-domestic sources. And it's really incumbent on the contractor to select the appropriate source based on that contract's allowances. So if you do have a non-domestic non-federal aid risk project that has a domestic source concern identified, the contract provisions will have modified the Buy America requirements. So in that case, they could choose from either the domestic or non-domestic source, whereas our 95% of our jobs are just going to allow the domestic source. We also talked about the potential for material shortages due to these new Buy America requirements and how that should be administered. We also talk about change orders to implement alternative materials or alternative designs as workaround solutions to the Buy America requirements. Again, Liz Marie covered that very well. We cannot modify the Buy America requirements to the contract. So if we were to seek a change order concerning those Buy America requirements, it would have to get FHWA's approval, and that is very unlikely. So we typically do an alternative design. We look at alternative materials that might not be subject to Buy America requirements. And in the last case, we may consider eliminating that portion of work to maintain federal aid eligibility. So the other thing the CPD has is an attachment entitled Frequently Asked Questions. And I won't go into a lot of detail as far as its review, but it does have some very good information in there. It gets down into some of the specifics of, for instance, what lumber is. You know, there's not a real great definition on what a lumber is. So here's what we have said. It applies to solid wood boards, planks, and posts. Right now, the engineered wood products such as plywood, oriented strand board, and glue laminated timber beams are not considered lumber. Neither are timber poles. So that kind of detail is placed in here. We've also placed this document on our contractor's corner, which is on our office engineer site and there for bidders' consideration. So it gives them more detail on how we've interpreted the Buy America requirements. I think the important thing, let's see. Yeah, you should also have access to this document. Now I'm going to go back to PowerPoint. Sorry about that. So I did want to mention, and I think Liz Marie covered this as well, very well. And just keep in mind, there's a high likelihood of further Buy America changes. I try to stay away from using Buy America 2.0, but really, I think in some respects, that's a really good indication that, yes, there are going to be additional changes coming forward. We know that in November, you know, there was the proposed de minimis allowance that USDOT placed on the Federal Register. Again, that hasn't been finalized, but that does potentially have some additional allowance for non-domestic use. We know that OMB proposed revised guidance back in February 2023. Some of that information proposed at that time would expand those additional construction materials. There was also recently the reconsideration of the 1983 FHWA manufactured product waiver that was originally posted in February 2023. That could be huge if it's significantly revised or eliminated in its entirety. There's been I think over 8,000 comments on that particular one, which is the largest number I've seen on any Buy America item to date. We also know in the future, they'll be reconsidering the non-domestic raw steel or iron general applicability waiver. But I think the key takeaway here is whatever the original contract's requirement, that follows that contract through its duration. So we have those jobs that came out before November 10th, 2022. Those will they will continue to be steel or iron Buy America compliant. We're not writing change orders on those to incorporate the new BABA requirements, and everything November 10th and later, at least currently, will require BABA. And regardless if we add, a significant time by change order, we add significant work to that project by change order, whatever that original contract's requirements are, will follow that change order requirement. So that's really what I had planned to share. I'm going to stop sharing here and bring Majid on.
Thank you, Ken. You can hear me okay, right? Just to make sure.
Yes.
Okay. So the first question is there a general certification from what we should obtain from the contractor to certify the construction material are made in America? I believe you already answered this one in the spec, but you can elaborate more if you want.
Yeah, so we make reference to certificate of compliance for each delivery of these additional construction materials provided to the project site. So that certificate of compliance needs to come from the manufacturer producer. And when we talk about certificates of compliance in our standard specs or special provisions, they all lead back to 6-2.03C of the standard specs. So those requirements for a certificate of compliance are in that section of our standard specs.
Does BABA Act apply to material that were at location before the project and were reused? I think that's probably applied for maybe a light pole or sign structure or manhole.
So if they're relocated within the project, there's no requirement, and unless they've reached the end of their service life and need to be replaced. If they're being furnished from outside the project, either by state furnished material or as, that would be a state furnished material case where they came from surplus on another job or salvage, they would still need to be Buy America compliant.
The next one is what is your recommendation and best practices for determining the 90% steel iron threshold? Is confirmation of composition by weight from the manufacturer is sufficient? Is there any other documentation or other recommendation for manufactured product as far as verifying the weight of the iron and steel?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's fairly self-obvious just by inspection of what that product is. But in other cases, it can get a little complex and you're going to need to look at manufacturers' cut sheets and make some evaluation of that product by weight. And it's interesting because some of the new proposals, if we do go back to the manufactured product requirements that are being used by other federal agencies and departments as far as Buy America, they're using the cost of component criteria, which is even more complicated. And hopefully we don't have to go down that road and we can continue with our 90% by weight rule. So.
Next question, how should LPA handle project delay and implementation of BABA requirements such as long lead time, shortage of material, or iron, steel, and construction material, just dealing with the delay on the project during the BABA implementation?
Yeah, I mean, if this is a local job, I'm going to leave that for Gourmet. But I mean, if it was a Caltrans job, and you see that there's a delay because of these new requirements that are being implemented, we basically have a third-party delay clause in our specs where we can provide non-working days related to that if it's a shortage of material, for instance. So essentially, we grant time, but we don't provide monetary compensation.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. I think we probably cover some of it in the next presentation, but if the delay during construction, immediately contact your district local assistant engineers, and then they can communicate with Federal Highways. If the delay is that, too big that, a waiver or some sort of request is gonna be followed, then I think we recommend immediately send your request, and then Federal Highways need to get involved. Then we go from there.
Right, and I have the last questions here. Can you discuss, actually, a couple more questions. Can you please discuss justification needed to demonstrate domestic material supply issues?
Let's see, can you please discuss the justification?
Yeah,
Oh, for,
right.
oh, okay. I think I understand what they're saying. So again, this is not in trying to get a waiver from FHWA. This is basically our process for our non-federal aid projects, where our project engineer has identified a domestic material supply issue. So the ones that I've seen most commonly are where we have a specific architectural feature. Either it's an existing, like aluminum or steel type of product out there, and we need to match that aesthetic feature. And we know that it's only coming from a non-domestic source. So that's what we've run into. What I would imagine maybe going forward as other agencies or recipients are implementing these requirements is maybe there are material shortages that would exist for some of these products. In that case, the project engineer could identify that material shortage on the non-federal aid risk project and exclude the federal Buy America requirements on that particular project. So those are a couple examples, but I imagine there's a multitude of others.
Next question, are mechanical items such as pump, motors, and subject to BABA Act?
Yeah, so if these manufactured products consist of 90% or more by weight of steel or iron, then yes, they are subject to Buy America requirements.
Thank you. Just one last thing I just like to add it, as my branch typically handled oversight over any local agency project on the state right-of-way. We're looking for, when Ken mentioned the 3101 process, the material to be furnished, that the contractor needs to submit to Caltrans or to the local agency. We're looking at the source of the material, not just the vendor or the supplier. So keep that in mind. We're looking for, as far as the COC is something, we're looking at something similar to what we're doing in the iron and steel. Typically, when we have a steel product on the project, we're looking at MTR, material testing report from the manufacturer, showing that the material is melted and manufactured in U.S. So that's something we're looking for, something to the similar language on the manufactured product and the construction material, wherever it's applicable. So this is kind of where when we have we're in our oversight role on these projects. That's typically what we're looking at. And that's all I got from my end. Thank you.
Ken, Majid, thanks so much. I think your Your clarity on materials and material exclusions helped with a lot of confusion. So appreciate that presentation. We're going to move on to Gurmeet Bana, who's the Caltrans Construction Oversight Program, to talk about the BABA contract requirements and construction oversight. Gurmeet?
All right, thank you, Scott. So we'll continue on our presentation. Ken and Lizmary covered background information and requirements in detail. So we'll in this presentation we'll try to tie this to Division of Local Assistance and how Division of Local Assistance communicates with local agencies. So we'll cover overview. We'll be covering the Local Assistance Procedures Manual, specifically Exhibit 12G, required federal aid contract language. Also, we'll cover, briefly Chapter 12 and 16, what changes to Chapter 12 and 16. We'll cover, what are local agencies' responsibilities and after the fact discoveries and the role of construction oversight program. So the construction oversight program is within under Division of Local Assistance, within the Office of Guidance and Oversight. I'm the construction program manager. We have construction oversight engineers assigned, geographic areas within the state. So we'll briefly cover what our roles are, and then cover ongoing Caltrans efforts. So, Local Assistant Procedures Manual, Exhibit 12G, covers required federal aid contract language. Ken covers, he covered the spec, the Caltrans came up with, and Lizmary covered all the background information. So this is the Exhibit 12G, is available for all local agencies to use, is part of the LAPM. And we, following their updates, following any guidance, any changes, we update language on the Exhibit 12G. So this statement is from Exhibit 12G, as you guys know. So the following language must be incorporated into all local assistance federal aid construction contracts. As part of that Exhibit 12G, Section 8 covers Buy America. This is the link here. You can access Exhibit 12G, and then Section 8 has been updated to reflect all the changes and spec that Caltrans covered. So as mentioned, so Exhibit 12G has been updated. There was an office bulletin issued last year to cover all the changes. And we had the blogs and frequently asked questions posted on our website. So you guys can go back and revisit, but those changes has been now permanent in the LAPM. All the office bulletin that incorporated the changes to 12G has been now part of the LAPM. So within the LAPM, you can access Exhibit 12G and go to Section 8 and see all the updated and required language as far as Buy America is concerned. And so this language is in line with Caltrans, 2022 standard specifications. As Caltrans changes, the new spec, if there is any changes in 2023, we'll be updating all to Exhibit 12G, because the Division of Local Assistance is as part of the BAY team that, Division of Local Construction, Federal Highways, and other divisions are involved. So in cooperation with Federal Highways and Caltrans, we'll keep making changes and updates as new policies and guidance comes up. So accordingly, LAPM Chapter 12 and 16 were revised to reflect the change. So Chapter 12 is about plans, specifications, and estimates, and Chapter 16 talks about construction contract administration. So we have made revisions to those changes, but as new guidance comes up again, we'll be continuously, making change. We'll communicate through office bulletins and daily blogs. So, to get any change or updates, please sign up to a local assistant blog here, through this link, so you can get weekly emails and office bulletins or any coins changes related to Buy America and other changes. So yeah, what are local agencies' responsibilities? So this was mentioned, some of it mentioned by Liz Mary. So local agencies should ensure adoption and compliance with new Buy America requirements, including Buy America requirements or construction materials for projects authorized E76 authorized on or after November 10, 2022. LPS that adopt, if you are using Caltrans special provisions, you must be using the current Caltrans special provision, which is currently the 2022, but the 2023 will be effective after a few months, and then refer to section 6104 by America. Or if you are using other spec, you have to use the language in Exhibit 12G covers the same spec that Caltrans 2022 spec shows. So we are updating 12G, so 12G is for your use. So I think I would recommend local agencies to refer to 12G and then use the federal aid language in 12G section 8 for Buy America requirements. So local agencies must expeditiously contact their DLAE to discuss potential Buy America waivers. This is either during design or construction. If there is any waiver discussions or thinking of a waiver, then the district local assistant engineer should be involved immediately so they can forward or initiate the conversation with federal highways, any potential request. As it was mentioned, it takes time for any waivers, so it's better to start the communication early on to help speed the process. So submit any Buy America waiver request to the district local assistant engineer, which will review the request and recommend to Federal Highway Administration for further processing. The waiver is approved only by Federal Highways. Caltrans doesn't have any authority to approve any waivers, so we have to forward the district local assistant engineer will forward with waiver requests to Federal Highways. So send your request to the DLAEs. So, not listing non-domestic steel and iron product or construction materials as non-participating in order to circumvent the Buy America requirements is not, is a violation. So LPS must not list non-domestic steel and iron products just for the sake of circumventing the Buy America requirements. As mentioned earlier, the LPA is responsible for enforcing the Buy America requirements. So generally, the material certification process has been adequate. So the requirements, the details of the material certification has been discussed. The material has to be processed. We need a certificate of material from showing that it is manufactured and processed in the United States, and that certificate of materials is needed from the source, as was stated already. So this is the responsibility of the local agency to get that material certification and then document in your project files. And also the contract provisions must require the contractor to provide, this language should be in this contract provision, a definitive statement about the origin of all products covered by America prior to payment for the item or installation. So before any payments are made, this LPA should be requiring the certificate of compliance. Certificate of compliance could, should include for iron and steel mill certifications and the source. So what happens if there is after the fact discoveries of non-domestic products incorporated into the project? So in the event there is after the fact discoveries, the local agency must immediately inform the district local assistant engineer, which will coordinate with Federal Highways to investigate and determine the appropriate solution. So the solution is going to depend on the type of issues and how detailed information is provided and how timely. So if you find that there is Buy America is not addressed during construction, then immediately contact the Division of Local Assistant Engineer. Potential actions could be, based on the outcome of Federal Highways investigation, could include, this is just potential, So it could be removing the excess non-domestic product and replace with domestic products, or they could determine that they could make non-compliant products, federal aid non-participating, in instances where there is evidence of carelessness, so negligence or incompetence or understaffing on the part of the contracting agency. The division office may determine that all project costs are ineligible. So the determination is going to depend on the circumstances. If the local agencies knowingly, did not comply with Buy America, and then we found out that during either project reviews or audits or by other means, then you could be jeopardizing, all eligibility, all the entire project. But however, if there is some instances where, you found out but there is explanations, then it could be a different determination, as mentioned earlier, either removing excess material or maybe making non-compliant products non-federal aid. So the construction oversight program, within the Division of Guidance and Oversight, our main role is, this is our link here, the construction oversight program. You can access the contact information for construction engineers. Also, our main role is reviewing projects during, either pre-construction, mid-construction, or post-construction. We also provide training. The main training is Resident Engineer Academy training that, we focused on contract administration that we provide a few times a year. But our main responsibility is project reviews. There's some information. We created this website within the Division of Local Assistance recently. So you can access some information here and training material or things like that in our link. So this is the types of reviews we do. We do pre-construction reviews, mid-construction reviews, and post-construction reviews. This is the review checklists here attached in the link. We don't review every project necessarily, due to the time constraints and limited staff. We select projects randomly for review. Some projects gets reviewed prior to construction, pre-construction reviews. Some projects, gets reviewed during construction, during the course of the project. We call them mid-construction reviews. And some projects may be reviewed post-construction. So, post-construction reviews basically for lessons learned, and then, we'll after our review, we send recommendations to the district local assistant engineers, and if local assistant engineers could share information with the local agencies. So this is a portion of our review checklist. This was from the mid-construction review. The post-construction review also shows a similar, it's about 10-page checklist, but this section F, I'm gonna focus for this presentation only on section F. Section F refers to the quality assurance program, POP, under LAPM. Section 1611 covers the quality assurance program and material testing. So this is few questions. There are several questions, I think 26 questions on section F. This is some of the questions selected. For example, question 1 asks you, does the LEPA have a copy of their QOP in the project record? So when the construction oversight engineer, they come to review projects, they will be looking for this information. They're gonna check if the QOP is in the project records. Also, the next question is the approval date on the QOP less than 5 years. So if it is older, you need to update your QOP. There is information and sample QOP on section 11 here in LAPM, section 1611. You can find guidance there, how to prepare your QOP and related material. So the main question here as part of Buy America and under section F is, this is the other question the construction oversight will be asking. Are the required Buy America statements, certificates for those materials made of iron and steel permanently incorporated into the work in the project records? This is the current checklist, but we have to, this is in the works. We are revising the checklist to include not just iron and steel, but the construction materials that discussed earlier will be included. So we'll be asking this question when we come to review projects. We will be asking for certificate of compliance. So we want to, complete certificate of compliance from the source and stating that the material complies with the contract and things like that. So you wanna make sure you have the certificate of compliance and in your project record. So when our reviewers come, oversight engineers come to your offices, then you can share this information. Caltrans Buy America efforts, as Ken mentioned, Caltrans, there's a Buy America implementation team. Bay team was formed to help implement the guidance on Buy America and developing specs. The Division of Local Assistance, we are part of the Bay team, so we attend meetings and share information. So we take information from the Bay team and we convey that to local agencies through our office bulletins or daily blogs. So the Bay team on the capital side, as Ken mentioned, they develop short and long-term acceptance processes, the standard special provision, and they actively work with the specification owners to identify any potential issues. On the local assistance side, on our side, Division of Local Assistance, we issue, we update LAPM manuals, specifically Chapter 12, plans, specifications, and estimates, Chapter 16, administer construction contracts. Any change that, any guidance policy updates, we accordingly update Chapter 12 and 16 of the LAPM, and Exhibit 12G, required federal aid contract language. Section 8 of 12G covers Buy America, so we updated that and we'll continue to update that. So there was an office bulletin issued 2207 last year, and covering all the changes. Under there, you can also find frequently asked questions. Some of the frequently asked questions were tailored to local agencies. So we had frequently asked questions from federal highways, and also the capital side have a list of questions, but we put some of the questions that we believe are applicable to local agencies, so you can access those frequently asked questions as well. So yeah, that covers my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and we can answer a few questions now, but we can follow up with any unanswered questions through an email.
That was excellent, Gurmeet. Thank you. There are a couple questions if you're up for a couple live answers. One from Julia. She's having trouble locating a service cabinet for a traffic signal that meets the new BABA requirements. If the manufactured item is over 90% iron and steel, but there aren't any manufacturers producing the item to meet BABA, is there any sort of exception that she can submit?
So yeah, I'm gonna ask Ken and Liz Marie to chime in, but I think first, if they cannot locate this material, I would I'm assuming the question is during design, maybe if they can look for alternative options as far as design is concerned. So either to get material that can be less than 90% by iron and steel by weight, or maybe send a waiver request. But as mentioned, the waiver request is lengthy. So Ken, do you have any kind, or Liz Marie, if you want to add, you can add on.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is if you can't find at least one domestic source and you're in the project development phase, I mean, you should be requesting a waiver. Now, if you find that out in the construction phase and you determine that that particular product is under the 0.1% of the total contract or $2,500, whichever is greater, that would be an allowance, minimum use allowance in the construction phase for the non-domestic source. So that's all I can add.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, Ken. And this next question may be something you can answer as well. Per presentation information, please explain if construction items can be made non-participating to avoid the Buy America, Build America, Buy America requirements.
So I think it was mentioned in the presentation, you cannot have them not participating just to avoid Buy America requirements.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Liz Marie, did you have any closing comments for today? Oh, you're muted.
All right, there you go. Okay.
There you go.
Sorry about that. So I would like just to thank everybody for your participation on this webinar. And I hope you were able to find this information beneficial and to help you implement a project, a program that is compliant with the regulations. And, it helps you retain that federal eligibility, because that's why we're here for. We're not here to take the money from you. We're here to facilitate you with the implementation of the federal aid program. I encourage you to take the information that we shared today and go back and double check that your specifications and your requirements are aligning with the current requirements on Buy America. Just verify that that's the case. And as I mentioned during my presentation, there's additional guidance that is going to be issued, additional final standards that is going to be issued by Federal Highways, OST, OMB. And we hope that we can get together again and share that information with you as that information becomes available, or doing something like we're doing today. But I just want to say, until then, if you have any questions about how to implement the current requirements, please reach out to Caltrans Division of Local Assistance. I'll be separately coordinating with them on anything that that requires our attention at the federal level. So thanks again for participating. I appreciate that, and thank you for the time.
Thank you, Liz Marie. And yes, that's helpful to know. Anybody with any follow-up questions, or any of your teams that may have questions, to contact Caltrans Division of Local Assistance, and they'll make sure that those questions end up being answered by the right parties. Germain, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. So, I want to thank, on behalf of Caltrans Division of Local Assistance, Office of Guidance and Oversight, I want to thank Liz Marie, Scott, Sherry, Ken, Majid, and all the participants. So I hope it was very informative, but we'll continue to communicate any change or updates from any guidance change from either the capital side or Federal Highways. Division of Local Assistance will continue to communicate with local agencies and answer any questions, and we'll coordinate with Liz Marie and Ken and their team to respond any questions the local agencies may have. So any questions, please communicate with your district local agencies, and also any construction oversight engineers during when they are reviewing projects as well. So thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, Germain. And yes, I'd like to just echo that. Not only do our presenters who did an excellent job today, but to Sherry Graham, who's been behind the scenes, dropping links and typing as fast as she can. Thanks so much, Sherry, for helping us out. We would like to have a recording available. If it's something that can pass through compliance, we will post it to our YouTube channel and make that well known through both the DLA blog and the Caltrans e-blasts. So look to either of those two agencies, subscribe for more information. Thanks everybody for attending today.